Hi, my name is Samuel Rogers and this is the game I worked on as part of a group for XB3001. The game is called Platoon and is a 2 to 4 player turn-based shooter. My role in the team was a 3D artist. I was responsible for the tanks, the weapons, trees and rocks. I implemented the auto textures for the terrain and I made the grass textures and blueprinted them to move in the wind. The visual idea for the tank was based on the art from the Metal Slug series of games. The tanks in those games had very stubby, cartoonish features. We thought this would be an ideal look for our game as we were aiming for it to be a party game. The cartoonish look would fit in easily with what we were looking for. In Platoon, the player is in control of a tank and spends a lot of time looking at the back of it. Therefore, the back of the tank should look interesting. I designed the tank to have exhaust pipes exposed and wide tracks that were clearly visible from behind. We decided that the tank's dimension should not exceed that of a 3-meter cube. This is so that the player can pivot around the environment without worrying about if they were going to make the corner or not. This also means that the player's silhouette is identical from multiple angles, giving the tank cartoonish proportions, making Platoon feel more like a party game. Also, having this shape gives no advantage to the direction the tank is facing, thus making the game easier to understand tactically. The tank is moving textures for the treads, giving the illusion that the treads are moving in either direction when forwards, backwards or turning is needed. For this I had to make a tank tread texture that looked like multiple tread links connected and would fit around the tank's treads in a single outline. The wheels would have panning textures, but also textures that rotate around a central point. This meant I had to have 2 separate textures for each wheel in order to make them look like they were rotating. I made high poly bakes for the tank's body and turret. These were made in ZBrush before being high poly baked into a normal map in Substance Painter. I wanted the tank to look like it sustained damage, but in a cartoonish way. The weapons are a big part of fun in Platoon. We wanted to make the weapon's visual language describe what the weapon does, and how it should be used when the player sees it on the side of their tank. Therefore, each weapon should have some stereotypical visual characteristics. For example, the dynamite would have a large clock on it, denoting that there is a time element involved in its use. The player starts with the cannon attached to the front of their tank. It fires a small projectile with some splash damage, and is affected by ballistic trajectory. The player has to use the markers on the reticule in order to make an informed guess as to where the shot could land. The further away the target, the more they have to account for the distance. The ram is collected from crates and attaches to the front of the tank. It looks like a plough, encouraging the player to use it to push other players into precarious situations, like off cliffs. When used, it amplifies the speed of the tank, making it hit the target further. For the airstrike, the player's view would be teleported up into the sky, facing down towards their target, which they could select by moving the camera. Once happy with their target, the players would drop 5 bombs in succession and the camera would follow the bomb doors opening. I made cartoonish faces on the sides of the bombs to make them look more visually appealing to the player. The sniper can be collected from crates and is a similar weapon to the cannon, but without the distance fall off. This is a hit scan weapon that directly fires at the target and instantly hits. This weapon would be ideal for long distance shots across the map, but has no splash damage. I modelled the weapon from a Barrett 50 cal sniper, but I made its proportions over-exaggerated so it was obvious to the player what the weapon's function was. The dynamite is a weapon that is used to drop near the enemy. The player then has a short number of seconds to retreat before the device exploded. This would cause damage and send a shockwave that could launch any tank within a certain perimeter away from the explosion. For greatest effect, this would be used to blow tanks into the water where they would be destroyed upon being submerged. For the dynamite's design, I made the proportions exaggerated and placed it on top of the tank so that it was in clear view of the player. I placed a big clock on top to show visually that there was an element of time involved in its use. For the rocks and trees in the level, I made simple low poly rock shapes in Maya, then exported them into ZBrush and sculpted shapes into high poly models using the various weathering tools in ZBrush. I then baked these into the low poly model's normal map using Substance Painter. I gave them a rock texture and tweaked the colour temperature to match the colourful colour scheme of the game. I made the trees in a program called Speed Tree. The default trees that came with the program looked too realistic for the cartoonish look we were going for, so I made them smaller and wider as well as the colour change and the bark to match the colour scheme of the game. For the ocean, I added a water asset that I found in the Unreal store. This texture moved like believable water and would reflect light in a very aesthetically pleasing way. The default settings were much too dark for the colourful look we originally intended for the game, so I made the colours lighter. This looked a lot better than the flat material I had before. This concludes my demonstration video for the assets I made in Platoon. I've been Sam Rogers, thank you very much for watching.